a business supermodel from all of this discussion on virtual reality and what it can mean for young people or young professionals or ambitious adults who wish to participate in this industry. You know, it's strange to know that an industry is coming and that it'll make a lot of money and identify it and feel like you're ahead of the curve, but not actually understand how to participate in any sort of meaningful way. Virtual reality is tough because there's a lot of really advanced technology involved. I would say that if a normal person, an outsider, somebody who's not in the technical loop, Silicon Valley loop, wants to participate, probably the way to get started would be to create the content or to plan the content that's going to be used on virtual reality, because the guys who know how to code it are not necessarily the most terribly literary or creative community. They might be. I mean, I'm sure there's VR technicians or coders who are also great storytellers, but it's not something you would traditionally associate with one another. So you could be the one to prepare that. You know, it starts with, you know, game concepts or application concepts or concepts for training courses or experiential programs that then must be coded, of course, into the hardware in some way. But that could be done as a team effort. The way to get started is to start creating the content. You want to outline it. You want to write down what it will be, what are the features, how does it work, how do you want it to process, you know, what do you want the experience to be of the user? And those are just technical things. You know, what problem does it solve? You know, I want to learn how to fix a truck. Does this help me learn how to fix a truck? Does this help me meet girls in bars? Does this help me have experiences like jumping out of airplanes when I would never do that in real life? How does it help me? What does it do for me? What problem does it solve? Is it just a very fun game that the VR experience makes that much better? So let's say you wish to be a virtual reality content creator, and where would you get started? Well, the first step, of course, would be that you want to educate yourself about the medium. You know, what is already taking place? What are other people already doing? What kind of VR applications are already being written and produced and that are available to the public? Oculus is out there. So how are companies using Oculus with their content? I know video games have features specifically for Oculus. So there's some video games which you very much can choose to be more VR oriented. I don't know how good they are. I mean, they're sort of stiff, but they're coming along. You know, movies could not be just movies anymore. You could be inside of them. You could have choices to make. You could have challenges within the movie, and it's still a movie. I saw this. There was a movie that came out recently called Player One Go. Fantastic movie. I highly recommend it. It's about people live in virtual reality all the time. They're racing. They're fighting. There's all sorts of games they can play, and they build up their character in virtual reality world, and, you know, they have their life there. And the real world is just people stacked on top of each other in a junkyard, more or less, but they don't really care because most of their time is in these virtual paradises where they're doing all these missions and experiencing all these different sensations. And it seems like a shadow of the future that's coming. It seems like not very long from now, this will be the way things are, especially with this coronavirus. I mean, we need virtual reality now. It would be so interesting, so fascinating. Our social lives could continue in a way that is just not possible right now, even here in 2020. Fortunately, we have social media, at least. I can only imagine what it was like in 1918 when they had no anything and they're quarantined in a room with their books, I suppose. Not a very good time. Life was a lot slower back then. So the first thing you want to do is educate yourself. What do the customers want? What do they expect? What's already being done? What is the nature of the platform? What are the companies that are participating in creating the content? Because you're going to want them to more or less sign you, the way a rock star gets signed by a record label. They want your content. Maybe they buy it like a script. I think that the actual best way has yet to be determined. So it's like, go blaze your own trail. But, it starts off with understanding the industry and the competition and the customer. So beyond that, you want to establish yourself. So you still want your website and your social media. You want to brand yourself as sort of a VR content development company. And even though you don't have any content yet, even though the extent of your content is notes you've made in a spiral notebook, it's still enough to move forward. You're establishing. You don't need anybody's permission. So you establish yourself, and maybe you start trying to network a little bit. You start going to tech crunches. You start going to conferences. You start trying to meet people, and when you meet them, you tell them, I'm interested in creating content for virtual reality. I've already done a lot of work on this, and I think I have some very interesting ideas that I would like to share with whoever will listen. I think some people will listen to you, especially if you seem like an interesting person. So then beyond that, you want to develop your content. So this will be the most expensive part. You'll probably need funders for it, I imagine. But what you can do before you even have funding, because at this show, we want to talk about how to make your business with no money. I think with the resources in the modern world, it's more often than not, you can get it off the ground without spending any money. So let's say that in terms of your product development, it's really the outline, it's really the prototype, it's the storyboard, the script that you write, the list of features and how you want them to work and how you want them to interact with each other and how players interact with the game and all of these issues. How does the game notify you? What is multiplayer like? What are the rules? And I don't want to harp just on games because there's also training programs that are just as relevant. Maybe you could teach something by having excellent cameras all around. 3D camera work, you might have to rent it for a couple of days. You could, for instance, you wanted to teach people how to fix a certain type of car that you have. You're a mechanic, you want to teach it. So you would get the proper camera equipment. You'd probably have to rent it, so that would cost some money as well. But if you started with your script and you approach the correct kind of company, they might fund the production and they would already have the cameras that you need and everything. So it's all about creating your concept. It's like this with any business. Create your concept, document it on paper, and sort of make a game plan about how you're going to approach the industry with your documentation that you just made. And that'll go a long way towards getting your idea created. It's not a wise idea just to think, how can I spend money to make this happen? Go out and look for friends. It's scary to look for friends. It's easier to throw money at a problem, but with an industry like this, you don't stand a chance. You don't stand a chance to buy the millions of dollars of equipment that's necessary to create a real, virtual reality environment, but it doesn't mean you can't get started participating. It comes down to concepts. Concepts have tremendous value in the business world, especially if they're well documented. So beyond that, then you want to start to market your product. Let's say that you found, you had your content and you've developed your concept, let's call it a concept document. You've created your concept document, which is more or less a business plan. You've storyboarded it, so you have some artwork associated with it. And now you can start to, and you've documented that it's yours with time-stamped information so that you have some copyright backing. You email your files to yourself, at least. So you've established yourself, you've developed your product in terms of the plan that you've written out, and now you need to market your product. So really what you're doing is now you're starting to approach the production companies that are most interested in what you're trying to do. Maybe the big ones will like what they hear. Maybe the smaller ones are better because they're easier to approach. And one tip I would include is if you're going to approach a big company, try to find people in the company already and try to make friends with low level who can introduce you to mid level who can introduce you to higher level, and then higher level who can introduce you to the top. Don't just run in, show what you got, nobody pays attention, you get discouraged and go home. Or don't just run in and blow up the CEO's LinkedIn every chance you get, or send him 1,000 emails like he's the only one to talk to. Because what I've learned, especially, you're always learning in this world, but even recently I've learned that if you approach people through another person who's trusted, you're going to get much further. But I don't want to get distracted with that. We're just talking about basic practices for virtual reality business now. We'll talk about, advanced networking at another time. So you're marketing your project, and your target customer is the companies who can make it into a bigger project. So beyond that, it's time to deliver your product. So let's say that you have somebody who wants to sign you. You need to show up, and you need to coordinate, and you need to be actively invested in the process of developing this product. So you don't just hand it off and go, sleep by the bar. You get your hands dirty. You roll up your sleeves, even though you're dealing with a highly competent team now. And maybe because you're dealing with a highly competent team, it's all the reason to start articulating what your vision is even more. So, you're delivering your product, and that is passing the knowledge and the concept to the team. But you're much better off if you stay part of it. It secures your equity in terms of in the case of a court battle as well. Let's suppose that you only had a couple hours of FaceTime with this company altogether, and later on they decide to try to cut you out of the process. Well, you only spent 90 minutes in the headquarters total, so how could you really prove that which you need to prove? They can prove that they picked up the ball and they ran with it 95 yards. Can you prove that you got those first 5 yards that are critical? I'm not sure. But if you have spent 10, 20, 30 hours, and in the negotiation process, you want to definitely say, I want to be part of this development. Maybe you don't want to be part of it, but what you really don't want is to lose out on your stake. So, showing up is a big piece of having it. So, and then beyond that is customer service. And what does customer service look like when you've sold your project concept to a larger company? Well, I would say that it includes staying on good terms with the executives at that company. Now that you've opened the door and they know who you are, there's no reason why you can't send them birthday cards. In fact, that's good. That's networking 202, isn't it? You know their name when you see them. Hi, Mr. Thomas. Hello, Mrs. Gray. Hello, Dave. Hello, Donna. Nice to see you. Let's keep working, being positive, can-do attitude. And those cover your 6 steps. That's your general business setup. But I think the key of it all is use your imagination. Think about what would be cool in a virtual reality environment and write it down. Write it down in a way that is usable by other people, so you want to, format it in a way that is functional. And you'll be well on your way to having a company because you've developed intellectual property. So I think it costs nothing to get started. Just a notepad, a paper, and a pen. And outlining your project is the most important step, hands down, far and away. And because it's the point when you go from having an idea in your head to having a document with your idea spelled out in the physical world. It is going from nothing to something. It is where the rubber... You would say where the rubber meets the road, but it's more like when the airplane is taking off and the rubber leaves the road. That's sort of that moment when you take flight. So that is our business supermodels section for this week. And just going over it again, you have infinite potential to create any idea. All you have to do is properly document the idea. And the world is waiting to receive it if you ask them properly. Good luck.